Right, the case of SANParks. 20 national parks, depending on how you count them, because some of the parks have been grouped together. If you take the garden route, they've combined a number of national parks. But if you look at it as separate entities, then you will most probably come to the number of 20. And then also included in that are your transfrontier parks. SANParks is the custodian of conservation. They are the leaders, or supposed to be the leaders of conservation in South Africa. An interesting fact that some of you might not be aware of is that 80% of the income is derived not by government grants, but by tourism activities. So tourism is crucial for SANParks, and in fact for most of the other conservation at provincial level authorities. So the big question then comes back to the issue of sustainability. How do we achieve sustainability? Right. So, first, again, like a good lecturer, I would first have to go back and say, what do we mean by sustainability? Because we keep on using words in society, but we all have different meanings. And then we have what we call a communication gap. Right. And a very simplistic definition is to meet the needs of the current generation without compromising the need of the future generation. To put it in simple terms, we still want to have rhinos in Kruger National Parks 500 years down the line. If we can't secure or guarantee that, then we've got a problem. Right? So that's what it's all about. And this slide I have to show because it shows you the three core issues or core concepts of sustainability. Now, in terms of sustainability, I think you can talk about sustainability internally in terms of tourism businesses, and we can talk about sustainability externally. The question raised earlier this morning, can tourism achieve sustainability, is difficult to answer because it depends on, are you talking about the tourism industry itself, or are you talking about resource management? Tourism cannot ensure sustainability of resources throughout the country. It cannot. Why? Because there are so many other role players. Sustainability is affected by consumption. So the more water we consume, it has an impact. The more food we consume, it has an impact, etc., etc. So there's a lot of consumption issues that we need to deal with that has little to do with tourism. So tourism can't be the answer to all the issues of sustainability. It can, and it has, and it will play a role, definitely. So it is, I think, important to distinct between those two. Now, going back to our research, what we did, and just a bit of history. Again, SANParks came to us and said, listen, we know how much money we generate from an economic point of view, but communities are asking the question, so if you have a park like Addo National Park, Elephant National Park, or Kruger National Park, what benefit do they derive from having this park? Again, if you go back to the early 90s debate, there was a debate, should we not rather take some land from Kruger and make it a cattle farm? Right? And then people say, no, you can't do that, and we had all these debates. But the fact of the matter is, SANParks at that stage could not demonstrate why it can't be done. You know, from a pure conservation point of view, it's not a good idea, I agree. But for the community who doesn't understand and who doesn't derive any benefits from this huge park, the question is, why can't we then rather have our cattle in there than look at the elephants and lions and all the rest? Okay, so the first study that we did was we took Addo as a first case study, which is a smaller park, less communities, and it's a good park to start with a model. Because at that stage, as I said, most of the work done nationally and internationally, when they referred to socio-economic, was basically an economic study. It had very little social value. The only social value was people said that this is the amount generated, so people must benefit. But it didn't illustrate that. Okay, so we then developed this, which might not look like a cum laude piece of work, and you might say, so is that it? And the answer is yes, that is it. Okay, but there is much more behind it that I need to also explain. It's just that I understand and I know that everyone is not an economist, So we have 4 key role players in a park environment, and you will most probably find that in any tourism development. There are generally 4 key role players. If you look to the left there, tourists. Why tourists? Because tourists travel and they spend money, and that money generates something, and I'm going to come back to that again. Then we have obviously the attraction. The national park, it can be an agricultural product, it can be like the World Heritage Site. It doesn't really matter, but there's an attraction, and the attraction obviously draws people to it. Then we have a community. Even if you go to Carnarvon or any of these communities, whether it's big or small, it doesn't really matter. There's a community somewhere. And who is a community? Not just black people. I always have to emphasize this, because in the media, it's true. When you talk about community, it's always seen as it's the black people. It's true. Am I lying?
Yes.
No.
I always tell my students that. Remember, community, you are part of a community. You are part of a community, and so it's not a black-white issue. It's a group of people that think and feel, well, we need to benefit from this. And they have a right to do that. Right. So we have a community, and next to that is all your businesses, who also forms part of the community, but they are also a separate entity. So those are the 4 key players, and amongst them, they are generating income, they're generating wealth, and some people benefit. So that was the model. And the question is then, how do we develop an instrument to identify the benefits that the community derive, identify the amount of money that people spend, the value that businesses get from it, and obviously the attraction as well. They all want to benefit from this. Okay, so 4 things influences the economic value of any attraction or tourism product. The first one is your number of visitors. Right? So it's important, the number of visitors play a role. But I want to highlight something when we get to no. Okay, I'll come back to that one. But that's the first important thing, is the number of visitors. So you need to know how many people go to a place, how many people attend, how many people are there. That's the first thing that you need to know. And that's generally not difficult with a park to do that. When you do work in other areas, for example, on the blue economy, one of the major issues that we face is, what is the value of beachgoers in South Africa? There is no such figure. So when someone tells you it is so many billions, I would like to see the methodology that derived at that point where they come up with that figure, because there are so many people going to beaches and we have no idea how many there are. Right, so that's a big challenge that we're facing with in the blue economy issue. So, but again, you need to determine the number of visitors. The second one is obviously the length of stay. How long do people stay? Now, from a practical point of view, if people only stay for one night, and unfortunately, if you look at international tourists, they would normally stay a very short period of time at attraction. And therefore, it is no surprise that your local tourist market is much bigger than your foreign tourist market. Because when you go to a place, you would normally stay a longer period of time. Right? If you take the average for people going to Kruger National Park, it's more than a week. Compared to an international tourist who would come in and stay most probably 2 days at the most, which is one night. Or if you're lucky, 2 nights. Come in, do a few game drives, boom, and out they go. Right. So length of stay is crucial. The third one, and this to me, from an economic point of view, is the most important one, is the amount spent. Why? Let's take a comparison between South Africa and Australia. South Africa attracts much more, and you can go to the figures, much more tourists than Australia. Much more. But Australia generates much more than South Africa from tourism. Why? Because of this, the amount spent. Okay, I understand it's a long-haul destination, I understand it and I recognize that. But people stay longer. And once you stay longer, you generally spend more. So that's the issue. So if you really want to grow tourism, in Carnarvon or any, those are the things that you need to look at. And then number 4, and this is from an economic point of view crucial, the size of the multiplier. And I'm going to come back to the multiplier when I talk about lessons learned, because I think the industry need to understand the importance of this. What it actually measures is how much money remains behind once people have left. Right? So that's what it, in general terms, that's what it means. The more money you can keep in an area, the better. I always explain it to, for those who are not economists, or take Cape Town over the dams. If you have no inflow and you have consumption, what happens? The dam level drops. If you have inflow, but the same amount are consumed, it remains the same. If you have a dam, very little consumption, but a huge influx or inflow, what happens? Like the Vaal Dam just. So that's the essence of it. Okay, and I think that there are things that we can do.